Dubai is one of the most astonishing feats of engineering in human history. A gleaming, futuristic megacity conjured out of a stretch of some of the most hostile desert on Earth, a place where, by every natural law, a city of millions has no business existing. There is almost no fresh water. There is barely any rain. The summer sun is merciless enough to kill. And yet there it stands, the tallest tower in the world, indoor ski slopes in the desert, islands built in the shape of palm trees, air-conditioned malls the size of small towns, a civilization that has, through sheer money and ingenuity, engineered its way out of every limit the desert tried to impose. Dubai's entire identity is that it can solve any problem with enough concrete, enough capital, and enough cooling. But there is one problem it cannot solve, and everyone who lives there knows it in their bones, even if they do not say it out loud. The heat. Not the ordinary heat that air conditioning defeats, but a deeper, more dangerous kind of heat that is closing in on the entire region. A heat that no building, no chiller, no amount of engineering can hold back. Because you cannot air condition the outdoors, you cannot cool the open sky, and you cannot engineer the temperature of the planet. And that heat, the one thing Dubai cannot build its way around, is getting worse. Not someday, every single year. So this is a story about the limit of engineering, about a city that has beaten the desert at almost every turn, and the one enemy it is losing to. Quietly, relentlessly, summer after summer. It is a story about a specific and terrifying kind of heat that most people have never heard of. One that can kill a healthy human being sitting still in the shade with all the water they can drink, and about why the Persian Gulf, of all the places on Earth, is the front line where that heat is arriving first. Dubai engineered a paradise in a place designed to kill you. The question that hangs over its glittering skyline is what happens when the thing it was designed to keep out finally grows stronger than the walls built to hold it back. Picture a construction site on the edge of the city just before dawn in the middle of August. The sun is not even up yet, and already the air is hot and thick and still, the temperature refusing to fall below the high 90s even in the dark, because the nights here no longer cool the way nights are supposed to. A crew of laborers is starting early, trying to get hours in before the worst of the day, and one of them, a man far from home who came here to send money to a family across an ocean, is already soaked through his shirt, already feeling the strange heaviness that comes when the body starts to lose its fight with the heat. As the sun climbs, the air grows heavier, wet and blazing at the same time, and the sweat that pours off him does nothing, because there is nowhere for it to evaporate into air that is already full of water. His head pounds. He feels dizzy, nauseous, and a cool prickle of fear, because some part of him knows that this is how it starts, that men on sites like this, one collapse, and sometimes do not get up. He is standing, quite literally, at the edge of what a human body can endure. In the open air of one of the richest cities on Earth, held back from the deadliest heat on the planet by nothing but the hope of reaching shade in time. That man, and the millions like him, live at the exact frontier this story is about, the thin line between the engineered world and the one thing it cannot cool. Let me start by taking you outside. Because the moment you leave the engineered world in a Dubai summer, you understand everything. Inside, it is a different planet. Every building, every mall, every car, every walkway is cooled to a crisp, comfortable chill so that a person can spend an entire summer day moving from one climate-controlled bubble to the next. From the cooled apartment to the cooled car to the cooled office to the cooled restaurant, and barely feel the outside air at all. And then you step outside, in July, in the middle of the day, and it hits you like the door of an oven swinging open. The heat is not like the heat of a hot summer day somewhere else. It is a physical force, a wall of blazing, heavy air that presses on your skin and pulls the breath out of you, and within seconds you feel your body begin to labor. In the worst of the summer, the air can sit well above 110 degrees, sometimes higher, and it is thick with humidity that rolls in off the warm waters of the Gulf, so that the sweat does not cool you, it just soaks you, and you feel like you are breathing through a hot, wet towel. People do not linger outside in a Dubai summer. They cannot. The city empties of pedestrians. The streets shimmer and bake, and everyone who can retreats into the cooled world and waits for October. That daily retreat, that surrender of the outdoors for months at a time, is the quiet admission at the heart of the whole city that the one place the engineering does not reach, the open air itself, has already become, for part of the year, a place humans cannot safely be. To appreciate what Dubai has done and what it is up against, you have to grasp the sheer scale of the war it wages against heat, because it is total. Air conditioning in Dubai is not a comfort, it is life support. The entire city is engineered around the assumption that the outdoor air is, for much of the year, hostile to human life, and that everything must therefore happen inside a cooled envelope. The famous malls are not just shopping centers, they are refuges, vast climate-controlled interiors where people go simply to exist comfortably, complete with the indoor ski slope kept frozen while it is 115 degrees outside, a monument to the city's determination to make the desert irrelevant. There are cooled bus shelters so people can wait for transport without collapsing. There are outdoor areas with cold air piped in. In the summer, the luxury hotels do something that sounds absurd until you understand the climate. They cool their swimming pools, chilling the water because otherwise it would heat up like a bath and offer no relief. The whole metabolism of the city is oriented around refrigeration, an enormous, ceaseless, energy-devouring effort to hold a bubble of survivable temperature against a world outside that wants to cook everything in it. It is genuinely magnificent, one of the most complete triumphs of engineering over environment anywhere on the planet. And it works, for now, inside the bubble. The trouble is that the bubble has an outside, and the outside is where the future is being decided. Because here is the thing the engineering cannot touch. You can cool a room, you can cool a building, you can cool an entire mall, or a car, or a stadium. What you cannot do is cool the outdoors. You cannot air condition a city street, a construction site, a beach, the open desert, the sky. And you certainly cannot cool the planet, whose average temperature is the thing actually rising. All of Dubai's magnificent engineering is, in the end, a way of carving out small pockets of coolness inside a vast envelope of heat. And the envelope is what is growing more dangerous. The city can keep making the inside colder, at ever greater cost in energy. It cannot make the outside anything other than what the climate delivers, and what the climate is delivering year after year is worse. This is the fundamental asymmetry at the heart of the story. Engineering can win any battle it can enclose within walls. It cannot win the battle that is happening in the open air over the entire region. And that is exactly the battle that is turning against the city. The heat Dubai cannot engineer its way out of is not the heat inside. It is the heat everywhere the walls do not reach. Now let me tell you about the specific kind of heat that makes this a matter of survival and not just comfort, because most people have never heard of it, and it is the key to everything. When we think about heat, we think about temperature, the number on the thermometer. But the human body does not actually care only about temperature. It cares about whether it can cool itself. And the way the body cools itself is by sweating, letting moisture evaporate off the skin to carry heat away. That system is astonishingly effective, which is why humans can survive very high dry temperatures. In a dry desert, the sweat evaporates fast and keeps you cool enough to live. But that cooling depends entirely on the sweat being able to evaporate, and sweat can only evaporate if the air is not already saturated with moisture. When the air is both very hot and very humid, the sweat cannot evaporate, because the air is already full of water, and the body's only cooling system fails. Scientists measure this deadly combination with something called the wet bulb temperature, which is essentially the temperature accounting for humidity. The temperature a thermometer reads when it is wrapped in a wet cloth and cooled by evaporation, exactly the way your skin is. And there is a hard limit built into human biology. When the wet bulb temperature reaches around 35 degrees Celsius, about 95 degrees Fahrenheit at full humidity, the human body can no longer shed its own heat at all. At that point, it does not matter how healthy you are, how much water you drink, or whether you sit perfectly still in the shade. Your core temperature climbs relentlessly, and within a matter of hours, you die of the heat, cooked from the inside by your own metabolism, because the air is too wet for your sweat to save you. Recent research suggests the real limit for most people may be even lower than that. This is the heat that no amount of drinking water or resting can beat, and it is the heat that is coming. And here is why the Persian Gulf, and Dubai with it, sits at the absolute front line of this threat, more than almost anywhere else on Earth. The wet bulb danger requires two things at once: extreme heat and extreme humidity, and most hot places on the planet have only one. The deep desert is brutally hot but bone dry, so the wet bulb stays survivable even at astonishing temperatures. The tropics are humid but not scorchingly hot. The Persian Gulf is one of the very few places that combines both to a lethal degree, and it does so because of an accident of geography. The region has the ferocious, direct desert sun of the Arabian Peninsula, delivering some of the highest raw temperatures on Earth. But right up against that desert sits the Persian Gulf itself, a shallow, enclosed, an extraordinarily warm body of water, its surface heating up like a vast warm bath under that same relentless sun. That warm sea pumps enormous amounts of moisture into the air along the coast, exactly where the great cities of the region, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, sit, so you get the desert's heat and the sea's humidity meeting in the same place at the same time, driving the wet bulb temperature toward the survivability limit. Landmark scientific studies have specifically identified the Persian Gulf as the region most likely to become the first place on Earth to routinely exceed the threshold of human survivability, projecting that under continued warming, cities in the Gulf could, later this century, experience wet bulb conditions during heat waves that cross the line no human body can withstand. Of all the places in the world, this stretch of coast, where Dubai built its miracle, is the bullseye for the deadliest heat the planet can produce. And it is getting worse every single year, which is the part the title names and the part that matters most. This is not a static threat that Dubai simply has to live with at a fixed level. It is a rising one. The world is warming, and the Gulf region is warming faster than the global average, its temperatures climbing decade after decade. The Gulf waters themselves are heating up, which means even more moisture pumped into the coastal air, pushing the wet bulb temperatures higher. Each summer, on average, brings more extreme heat, more days pressing against the limits, more nights that fail to cool down, and a steady march of the whole baseline upward. Records that once stood for decades now fall regularly. the number of dangerously hot days per year climbs. The margin between the heat the region experiences and the heat that kills is thinning year by year, and a trend that shows no sign of reversing and every sign of accelerating. This is the crucial, terrifying quality of it. Dubai is not fighting a fixed enemy it has already learned to hold at bay. It is fighting an enemy that grows stronger every year, that its engineering must work ever harder just to keep pace with, and that is heading, on its current trajectory, toward conditions in the open air that no engineering can make survivable at all. The city is running up a down escalator, and the escalator is speeding up, and if you think the survivability limit is a distant, end-of-century abstraction, understand how close the region has already come. The Gulf and its surroundings have produced some of the most extreme heat index readings ever recorded anywhere on the planet. Days when the combination of temperature and humidity pushed the apparent heat to levels around 165 degrees Fahrenheit, deep into territory that is immediately dangerous to human life. Coastal cities in the region regularly endure summer conditions that would be considered a once-in-a-generation emergency almost anywhere else, and endure them for weeks. And one of the cruelest signs is what has happened to the nights. In much of the world, the night is when the heat breaks and the body recovers, but along the Gulf, the nights increasingly do not cool, with overnight temperatures staying brutally high and humid, so that there is no relief even after dark. No chance for the body or the environment to reset before the sun rises and does it all again. Scientists tracking the region have found the worst humid heat often peaking in the evening hours, precisely when people expect relief and do not get it. The Gulf is not waiting for some future to arrive at the edge of survivability. It is already brushing against that edge during its worst heat waves, already producing conditions that flirt with the limit of what a person can endure, and the whole distribution is sliding higher each year, which means the brushes against the limit will become touches, and the touches will become sustained contact. The future this story warns about is not a prophecy. It is a trend line that has already begun to arrive. Now here is where the engineered solution reveals its hidden fragility, because the very thing that keeps Dubai alive is also its greatest vulnerability. It all runs on energy, and it all depends on the machines never stopping. Think about what it actually takes to keep an entire desert megacity refrigerated through a summer that would otherwise be lethal. It takes staggering, continuous amounts of electricity to run the millions of air conditioners, the chillers, the cooling plants, around the clock for months. That electricity has to be generated, which in the Gulf often means burning fossil fuels, which adds to the very warming that is making the heat worse, one of several vicious loops in this story. But the deeper vulnerability is dependence. The survivability of the city during the worst of the summer hinges entirely on the cooling never failing, and that makes a simple power failure into a potential catastrophe. If a major blackout struck a Gulf city during a peak summer heat wave, the interiors that people depend on for survival would begin to heat up, and with the outdoor air already at or near lethal levels, there would be nowhere safe to go, no cool refuge to flee to, no natural relief anywhere. A prolonged loss of power during an extreme heat event in a fully air-conditioning dependent city is one of the genuine nightmare scenarios of a warming world, because the entire population's survival is resting on an unbroken supply of electricity to machines. Dubai has engineered its way out of the heat, but in doing so, it has made itself totally, absolutely dependent on that engineering never stopping, and a system that must never fail is a system living permanently one failure away from disaster. The strength of the solution is also the depth of the trap, and there is a bitter irony hiding inside all that cooling, because the air conditioning that saves the inside is helping to cook the outside. An air conditioner does not make heat disappear. It moves heat, pulling it out of the indoor air and dumping it into the outdoor air. So every one of the millions of air conditioners running in a Gulf city is taking the heat from inside the buildings and expelling it into the streets, adding to the outdoor temperature. Multiply that across an entire dense city of glass towers and pavement and machines, and the effect is significant. The built environment absorbing and radiating and generating heat, making the urban outdoors even hotter than the surrounding desert, a phenomenon called the urban heat island. So the more the city cools its interiors, the more heat it pumps into its exterior, worsening the very outdoor conditions that make the cooling necessary in the first place. It is a self-defeating spiral at the heart of the engineered solution, cooling the inside by heating the outside, which then requires more cooling. The engineering does not actually defeat the heat. It relocates it from the spaces humans occupy to the spaces they must cross between them. And in doing so, it makes those in-between spaces, the streets and the open air, more dangerous still. The city is, in a real sense, warming itself in the act of trying to stay cool. And when you ask who actually pays the price of this heat, the answer exposes something uncomfortable, because the danger is not shared equally at all. For the wealthy and the comfortable, the cooled bubble is nearly complete, a life lived almost entirely inside the engineered climate, moving from cool to cool, rarely exposed to the real air for more than the few seconds it takes to reach the next door. But that bubble is built and maintained by an enormous workforce of laborers, many of them migrant workers from South Asia and elsewhere, who do the physical work of constructing and servicing the city, and who cannot do that work from inside an air-conditioned room. They build the towers, pave the roads, tend the grounds, and much of that labor happens outdoors, in the direct sun, in the killing heat. These are the people on the true front line of the Gulf's heat, exposed for hours to conditions that can cause heat stroke, kidney damage, collapse, and death, and heat-related illness and fatalities among outdoor workers in the region are a serious and often underreported problem. Authorities have imposed midday work bans during the hottest months, ordering outdoor labor to stop during the peak hours, an acknowledgement that the open air is simply too dangerous to work in for part of the day. But the work still gets done, in the hours around the ban, in heat that is still extreme. So the reality of the Gulf's heat is a tale of two cities, the cooled world of those who can afford to stay inside it, and the exposed world of those whose labor sustains that cooled world from without, bearing the brunt of the very heat they are helping everyone else escape. As the heat worsens each year, it is these workers who feel it first and worst. The human cost of the gap between the engineered paradise and the lethal reality it holds at bay. There is even a feedback loop hiding in the water, because the way the region gets its fresh water is quietly making the sea, and therefore the humidity, worse. Dubai has almost no natural fresh water, so it makes its own. Largely through desalination, taking seawater from the Gulf and removing the salt to produce drinking water on an enormous scale. It is another triumph of engineering, another way the city has conquered a limit the desert imposed. But desalination has a byproduct. It takes in seawater and returns to the Gulf a much saltier and often warmer, concentrated brine, and the Gulf. Being shallow and enclosed with little exchange with the open ocean does not flush that out easily. Across the whole region, the intense desalination of a booming, thirsty set of coastal cities is gradually making the Gulf saltier and contributing to warming its waters. And a warmer Gulf, as we have seen, pumps more humidity into the coastal air, which pushes the wet bulb temperatures. The deadly humid heat, even higher. So the very process that provides the water to sustain life in the desert is helping to intensify the humid heat that threatens it. One more loop in which the engineered solution to one problem quietly worsens another. Everywhere you look in this system, the fixes feed the underlying danger. The power plants warming the climate, the air conditioners warming the streets, the desalination warming and thickening the air. The engineering is brilliant, and it is, in these hidden ways, sawing at the branch it sits on. So step back, and here is the profound and simple truth the whole story circles around. There is a limit to what engineering can do, and it is the temperature of the world outside the walls. Human beings are extraordinary problem solvers, and Dubai is one of the greatest monuments to that ability ever built. A place that took a lifeless desert and made it bloom with towers and water and light through sheer ingenuity. It is easy, looking at such a place, to believe that there is no problem money and cleverness cannot solve, no limit that cannot be engineered around. But the heat closing in on the Gulf is a different kind of problem, because it is not contained within any wall. It is the condition of the open air across an entire region, driven by the temperature of the whole planet, and no city, however rich or clever, can build a roof over the sky or a chiller for the sea. You can cool the inside forever, at ever-rising cost and ever-growing fragility. But you cannot make the outside safe, and a civilization cannot ultimately survive as a permanent archipelago of refrigerated boxes and a sea of air that kills you in hours the moment you step out. That is the wall the engineering finally hits. Not a problem to be solved, but a limit to be reckoned with, and it is a limit the region is being pushed toward a little more every year. Dubai proved that humans can engineer their way out of almost anything. The heat is the almost, and it is worth sitting with what it would actually mean for a place to cross that limit, because the consequences reach far beyond personal discomfort. A region where the outdoor air periodically becomes lethal is a region whose entire way of life is called into question. Ports cannot load and unload freely, because dock work is outdoor work. Construction slows or stops for large parts of the year. Anything that requires people to be outside, farming, maintenance, transport, emergency response, becomes hazardous or impossible during the worst stretches. A power failure stops being an inconvenience and becomes a mass casualty event. Tourism, the image of a sunny playground, collides with the reality of a season no visitor could safely spend outdoors. And underneath all of it sits the deepest question of all, which is whether people will continue to live somewhere that for part of every year is trying to kill anyone who steps outside. History shows that humans will endure and adapt to a great deal, and the wealth of the Gulf can buy an enormous amount of adaptation. But there is a point, somewhere out ahead on the current trend, where the cost and the risk of maintaining a large population in periodically lethal air becomes a genuine strategic question for these societies, a question about whether the great desert cities of the Gulf can remain in the long run, the thriving population centers they are today, or whether the heat slowly forces a reckoning that no amount of cooling can indefinitely postpone. That is the stake, and it is why the yearly worsening of the heat is not a footnote, but the central fact of the region's future. And the region is not standing still in the face of this, which is exactly why the limit is so important to understand, because even the most ambitious dreams run straight into it. There is talk, and there are proposals, of ever more extreme engineering, of entire domed and climate-controlled cities, of covered, cooled streets and neighborhoods sealed under glass, of pushing the air-conditioned bubble outward to enclose more and more of daily life so that people need never touch the real air at all. The region already invests heavily in cloud seeding, firing substances into the sky to try to coax out more rain and take the edge off the heat, another attempt to engineer the very weather. And each of these is impressive, and each of them misses the core problem in the same fundamental way. Doming a city is just building a bigger box, one that still has an outside, that still depends utterly on power, that still relocates its heat rather than removing it, and that still leaves everything and everyone beyond its walls, the ports, the roads, the workers, the sea. Exposed to a climate growing more lethal, cloud seeding cannot lower the temperature of a region or cool the Gulf. You can keep enclosing more space, but you can never enclose all of it, and you can never enclose the planet, and the planet is the thing that is heating up. Every grander engineering dream is still, at bottom, a bigger bubble in a hotter sea of air, and a bubble, no matter how large, is still defined by the fact that it has an outside it cannot control. The dreams get more ambitious every year for the same reason the heat gets worse every year, and the dreams are still chasing a target that engineering, by its nature, cannot catch. Stand on a balcony in Dubai on a summer night and look out over the impossible skyline, the towers glittering, the whole miraculous city humming with the sound of 1,000,000 machines holding the desert at bay, and it feels, for a moment, like proof that human ingenuity has no limits at all. But listen to that hum and understand what it is. It is the sound of a city cooling itself against an outside that is getting hotter every year, an unbroken, energy-hungry, ever more strained effort to hold a bubble of survivable air inside a region drifting toward the deadliest heat on the planet. The engineering has won every battle it could put behind glass. The one battle it cannot enclose, the temperature of the open air over the Gulf, it is slowly losing, and the enemy grows a little stronger with every passing summer. Dubai built a paradise in a place that was trying to kill it, and for now the paradise holds. But the thing it cannot engineer its way out of is not going away. It is getting worse every single year out there beyond the cooled glass, in the open air over the warm and rising sea, where the future of the whole gleaming experiment will ultimately be decided, not by what humans can build, but by how hot the world outside their walls is willing to let them live. Every summer the hum grows a little louder, and the machines work a little harder, and the air beyond the glass gets a little more dangerous, and the whole shining civilization leans a little more heavily on the one assumption it can never afford to be wrong about, that the cooling will always hold. For now, it holds. And out past the towers, over the warm and darkening sea, the heat that no one can engineer away rises quietly toward the city. 1 degree, one summer, 1 year at a time, patient in the way that only the climate can be, waiting to find out whether human ingenuity, for the first time, has finally met a wall it cannot build its way over.